Good morning and a very warm welcome to all distinguished speakers, educators, researchers, and participants joining us from around the world for the International Symposium on Artificial Intelligence and Education, Opportunities, Ethics, and Innovations, organized by the International Society for Educational Leadership. The symposium brings together global experts to explore the transformative role of AI in education while also reflecting on the ethical responsibilities and innovations reshaping the future of teaching and learning. Today's symposium features a rich lineup of keynote talks, expert sessions, and panel discussion led by eminent academicians, researchers, and practitioners from India, the UK, and the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed further, let me take a moment to walk you through the schedule planned for today's AI Symposium. We begin the symposium with our engaging panel discussion from 9:30 to 10:45 a.m. IST on the thought-provoking theme, Teaching with AI, Possibilities, Puzzles, and Perils, featuring distinguished experts Eric Roth, Robert Filback, and Brent Warner. Following this, from 11 a.m. to 12 noon IST, we will have an insightful session on accessibility in education, AI impact or possibilities, led by Mr. Shankar Subia from Ajit Infotech, where we will explore how AI can make education more inclusive and accessible. After the lunch break, the symposium will continue from 2:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. IST with another inspiring session titled Reimagining Education with AI, Transforming Teaching and Learning, delivered by internationally renowned educator and author Mr. Nick Petrie from Petrie Publications Limited. We are delighted to begin this symposium with an engaging panel discussion on teaching with AI, possibilities, puzzles, and perils. The session will set the tone for the symposium by examining the transformative potential of AI in education alongside the pedagogical, ethical, and practical challenges it presents. Before we begin, let us briefly know about the organization behind this remarkable initiative. The International Society for Education Leadership, ISEL, is a professional academic organization committed to promoting excellence, innovation, and research in education and educational leadership. Since 2020, ISEL has been successfully organizing international academic events such as the ELT Summit and the English Literature Summit, creating meaningful opportunities for educators and researchers worldwide to collaborate and exchange ideas. Under the visionary leadership of Professor G. Krishnamurthy, President ISIL has positively impacted more than 20,000 educators globally through webinars, professional development initiatives, and technology-driven learning experiences. ISEL's AI Symposium 2026 is centered around the theme AI in Education, Opportunities, Ethics, and Innovations. The symposium aims to bring together educators, professionals, students, and researchers to explore the transformative role of AI in education, discuss ethical and practical challenges, and share innovative teaching and learning practices. The symposium proudly features experts from the USA, the UK, India, and several other countries, truly reflecting the global spirit of academic collaboration. And now it is time for one of the most thought-provoking segment of the symposium, the panel discussion on the theme Teaching with AI, Possibilities, Puzzles, and Perils. AI is no longer a futuristic concept. It is already reshaping classrooms, assessment, content creation, student engagement, and even the role of educators themselves. While AI opens doors to innovation and personalized learning, it also raises important questions regarding ethics, authenticity, critical thinking, and the future of teaching. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor and privilege to welcome our esteemed panelists who bring global expertise, innovative perspectives, and rich academic experience to today's discussion. We welcome the esteemed panelist Eric Roth, a USC Master Lecturer and prolific author whose career has been shaped by one core question: How can English learners gain the confidence, vocabulary, and conversational agility to say what they actually mean in English? As a co-author of the globally acclaimed Compelling Conversation series, his work has empowered learners and educators in over 50 countries. He taught writing to University of Southern California, engineering students in Madrid, Spain and Paris, France and Vietnam. He offers candid classroom-based insights as demonstrated by his plenary keynote for the Defense Language Institute in 2023 titled Chalkboards to Chatboards, exploring EdTech tools for English teachers and sharing some emerging best practices. The address reviewed the profound changes in teaching English over the last 25 years. It also offered the audience of 200 experienced DLI English teachers some practical strategies for using generative AI while working with internationally military officers and airplane pilots from American allies. During the COVID crisis, Roth was a plenary speaker at the 2020 Virtual ELT Summit. He gave the opening presentation at the 2021 ELT Summit on hedging and boosting language in academic writing. In a 2023 Diesel podcast, he remarked, "Let's not rush to worst case assumptions and apocalyptic conclusions. We don't know what happens next, and our choices do matter." With these words, we welcome Eric Roth to this panel discussion. Give a huge round of applause. We have the virtual applause also. Another distinguished panelist is Dr. Robert Filback, widely known as Rob Filback, who is a distinguished educator, academic leader, and researcher serving as Professor of Clinical Education at the University of Southern California, USC Rosier School of Education. He currently serves as the chair of the Master of Arts in TESOL program, where he plays a pivotal role in preparing future educators and advancing excellence in English language teaching and teacher education. In addition to his leadership in TESOL education, Dr. Filback also co-directs the Rosier Democracy Project, an initiative focused on fostering civic engagement, democratic dialogue, and inclusive educational practices. His work reflects a deep commitment to educational innovation and social responsibility and global learning communities. With extensive experience in teacher education, curriculum development, and language pedagogy, Dr. Filback is widely respected for his learner-centered approach and his contributions to contemporary educational discourse. With a huge round of applause, we welcome Dr. Robert Filback to this panel discussion. We now invite an esteemed panelist, Brent Warner, an award-winning educator, speaker, podcaster, and educational technology specialist, widely recognized for his innovative work at the intersection of artificial intelligence, language learning, and digital pedagogy. He currently serves as a professor of English as a second language at Irvine Valley College in California, where he focuses on integrating technology and innovation into the language learning process. Warner is passionate about helping multilingual learners and educators thrive in a rapidly evolving digital world. He works with teachers and institutions across the globe to explore practical, human-centered approaches to educational technology and AI integration. His work emphasizes meaningful communication, critical thinking, ethical AI use, and student empowerment. Brand is a co-host of the widely respected Diesel podcast, Digital Innovation in English as a Second or Other Language, where he discusses emerging trends in AI, educational technologies, and language teaching. He is also the author of the AdTech for Multilingual Learners, 48 Fun and Flexible Activities for Every Classroom, published by ISTE. Please join me in welcoming Brent Warner to this panel discussion as our third panelist. Our panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Tarun Patel, Assistant Professor in English, GEC Gandhinagar, which is affiliated to Gujarat Technological University, Ahmedabad, India. He is an accomplished academician, researcher, and educator known for his insightful perspectives on education, innovation, and emerging technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this panel discussion's moderator, Dr. Tarun Patel.
Thank
Over
you.
to you, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dipali, for that comprehensive introduction to the symposium as well as to our panel discussion. Thank you very much, Eric, Robert, and Brent for joining us. We are truly happy to have you on board. Well, to start with the panel discussion, since I would be moderating, I was doing my homework for last 2 days, and I came across some of the articles on the Edutopia when I searched for AI in education. And some of the titles reflect, they say how forward-thinking schools are shaping the future of AI in education. The other article says using AI tutors to flip your classroom. Third one was guiding students to develop AI literacy. Another one, but striking, says why using AI is fine for teachers but not for the students. And then there are two more, which say proactively limiting the use of AI in the classroom. And lastly, avoiding pitfalls of using AI in the schools. Now, as we look at these titles, there are some recurring themes that appear throughout, and they are AI should support learning, but it should not replace thinking. Ethical use and transparency are quite essential. AI literacy is becoming a necessary educational skill the way it is becoming for the programmers and the IT professionals. So similarly, it is a skill that all educators would require, perhaps if they wish to survive. Teachers need ongoing professional development on AI. And the last theme that touches everyone is human creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration remain central despite all these technological advances. So together, these articles portray AI as both an opportunity and a challenge for modern education. So, dear all, welcome to this panel discussion on teaching with AI, possibilities, puzzles, and perils. As educators across the world navigate rapid technological transformation, artificial intelligence is no longer definitely is a distinct concept. It is already shaping how we teach, how we learn, how we assess, how we communicate, and how we create knowledge. UNESCO has done a wonderful job doing depth research in the use of AI in education, and it has also promoted a couple of voices it calls, which again say AI should enhance human learning and it should not diminish human agency. It says teacher training and AI literacy are essential. It says student data privacy and ethical safeguards must be protected. And it says AI should reduce educational inequality and it should not widen it. So as as we say, AI presents a remarkable possibilities for personalized learning, accessibility, creativity, and efficiency. And at the same time, it raises important puzzles about pedagogy, assessment, authenticity, and the evolving role of we educators. It also brings serious concerns regarding ethics, bias, privacy, academic integrity, and overdependence on technology. Today's discussion is not about whether AI should exist in education, because it already does. The more important question is how do we engage with it responsibly, thoughtfully, and humanly. And we are fortunate that we have Robert, Eric, and Brent to support this panel discussion, where we look forward to meaningful dialogue and exposure, both opportunities and challenges, while helping all of us reflect on the future of teaching and learning. So the first thing that comes to my mind is to all three, Robert, Eric, and Brent, if you could tell us in a nutshell what AI in education means to you personally. Starting with Eric.
I was hoping to go third. But for me, it highlights that we're working in 2026. We're not teaching in 1976 or 1926. So we have to, be in the moment. So there are unique technological possibilities here. And I think it kind of is our obligation to ourselves and our students to explore those possibilities and kind of lead by example. Having said that, part of that leadership, I think, means avoiding premature conclusions, whether they're overly enthusiastic or overly pessimistic, because as you indicated, it's here, it's how we choose to deploy it. And we may have no control over the big picture AI policies, but we do have some control, a lot of control over our own individual classrooms or programs.
Yes. Robert?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, well, I like what Eric said, and also I just wanted to thank you, Tarun, for
Thank you.
the panel, and thank you for Dipali for the kind introductions. Um, I think for me, that you could go lots of different ways with your question, but maybe one way to answer it is, I guess I'm thinking of it as a disruptor that has great potential. But if we look at previous disruptors, even in recent times, whether that's the shift to fully online or moving to fully synchronous online learning, or even the COVID disruption and the dramatic shift we all had to make to remote teaching. If we think about some of those disruptors, fundamentally they didn't change a lot of pedagogy, and they didn't really change, I think, how people thought about learning and how they fundamentally went about, teaching and learning. With this one, I'm actually a little bit excited because I think it is stirring maybe a different kind of debate and discussion. As part of the Democracy Project, we are facilitating AI at we're calling them AI at deliberations, and we've done a couple of AI at Russ here, and we're getting multiple different groups of stakeholders together to have very structured conversations about this. And it's really illuminating, and the turnout is dramatic. So I guess what I'm thinking is maybe I'm seeing it as a disruptor, and maybe with the slightly higher potential than some of the past to really fundamentally change how we understand learning, how we think about it, and ultimately how we practice it. And I have grave concerns too, but I think that's one way that I'm thinking about it right now.
Yes. Thank you, Robert. Yes. Please, Brent.
Yeah. Also, thank you, Tarun, and everybody for having me here as well. So I think that for me, one of the things, one of the very big things is just the opportunity to rethink education. So much of what we have done, for so long has been the final product is the thing that we assess for showing our learning for work, which is not really how, things are it's not a reality anymore. So when you say, hey, any tool out there can go ahead and create a final product that we can look at and just assess that, that doesn't show any of our learning anymore. And so now we have an opportunity to really reconsider what it actually means to learn and how we assess the learning process for students. I think for those of us with a background in pedagogy, there are a lot of professors and teachers out there who have a little, a leg up on that conversation because they have come through a process of pedagogical learning and teaching. But also, I work in an institution where many of our teachers don't have a background in pedagogy. They have a background in a mastery of their topic, and they understand their topic very well, but they don't necessarily understand things like how to scaffold lessons, how to use formative assessments to show what learning looks like, to show that you understand one thing to the next. And so I think that what we're starting to see is that a lot of teachers are recognizing how important the actual background of pedagogy is and how that can make a difference in the actual learning outcomes of our students. And so that is a big shift where we're not just looking at some final product, but we're looking at the process of everything. And I really, that is an area where I have high hopes for, I mean, there are lots of things that can be scary about it, But if we start really readjusting our thinking and saying, how do we process this way, that can be a really valuable uh, a really valuable thing for students who are starting to have the same questions too, is like, what am I doing in school here, right? We're seeing a lot of students starting to ask that, and they're saying, well, what's the value of what I'm getting out of coming here, paying money to go to this school, whatever else it is. And so I think that it's on us a lot to make those shifts to continue to provide value for students as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Brent. I have divided my questions, around 50 questions, into sections such as opportunities with AI, challenges and dilemmas, ethical and practical concerns, and the future with AI. So the first question in opportunities with AI goes to Eric. Whereas I say, in what ways can AI genuinely improve teaching rather than simply automating it, Eric?
I'm going to give a really romantic answer. I think it can re-enchant students. It can help them just enjoy the play of discovery. And at its best, it opens up possibilities we never had. I'll give you an example. One of the silly assignments that I don't think is silly at all that I have students do is research what happened on the day they were born. And with AI, they can come to class and they know nothing about perhaps the day they were born. They know their family stories, but they may not know what happened in their city or their country at all. And instantly, you can have them discuss that and then share back and forth. You can do amazing things. I want AI to deepen people's sense of curiosity and possibility. And I think we can do that. And I think if we worry less about what we're losing and think more about what we're gaining, we can do that. Likewise, I have them interview a dead author. Pick a favorite dead author, interview them, you get a response, you go through the 10 questions, and then you find out, well, can we fact check those 10 answers? How realistic were those? What were they based on? What year were they? Or were they imagined responses from an AI tool? Was the vocabulary appropriate for the time period or not? We can do all kinds of things. I think that's really the trick, is getting people excited about their own education, their own lives, and their own presence in a particular place and time. I think sometimes we fail to do that. It's sometimes students are asking, how little can I do to pass the class? How little can I do to get a good grade? I don't want to play those games at all. I want to try to have people excited about their own lives and be more curious. And I think AI gives us some tools and ways to do that.
True. Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. Yes, definitely. Interviewing those who are not among us is quite a creative task. Brent, now how can AI help students improve their creativity, communication, and critical thinking? And if you could also, like integrate bit of how podcasting tasks could be integrated.
Sure. So I think with AI, one of the things that students can work on is, for me, it's really that opportunity for customization of information, right? So when you start, I always make this joke when I talk about it, is that, language learning textbooks, for example, kind of treat the world as though there are three cities in the world. There's Los Angeles, New York, and London, and that's it, right? That's the only places that any of these books ever talk about. And so one of the things that I'm really spending time with is localizing education and bringing it into, hey, what's happening in our town? What's happening around us? Now, I am close to Los Angeles, and Eric and Rob are both in Los Angeles, so I am not dismissing the value of the city of Los Angeles. But all around the world, we do see, there are students that are never going to go to Los Angeles, New York, London, right? And so when we start showing them, hey, hold on a second, the learning that we're doing actually can matter where you're living, whether it's totally out in the countryside, and we have students even in parts of California that are very rural and they're living in farm country. And so being able to adjust those conversations around places and lifestyles that they know and they live in and understand, that by default opens up their creativity and opens up their critical thinking, because they can better connect the ideas that we're talking about to the world that they live in and that they know. And so that shift alone, to be able to say, hey, hold on a second, instead of, whatever these activity accesses are, let's talk about the history of our town, right? Let's talk about the places and the people that we know individually, or, even the most obscure, maybe I'm interested in a really minor rock band out there, but I can use that band now to start talking about the language that I'm learning, instead of all of these mainstream things that maybe I'm not interested in. For my students to be able to say, hey, hold on a second, your interest, your life is valid and validated through the conversations and the learning that we're doing. That's a really big one. And so then to bring it back into the podcasting conversation, that same thing is the whole point, is like, well, what's the life that you live? What's the way, the things that are important to you? And so the students can use, if you're doing podcasting with your students, right, you can have them do things like use these tools to research and make connections between the things that you're learning and the places that you live or the people that you know, and they can then have a real great kickstart into the conversations that they're actually really interested in trying to develop, without necessarily all of the roadblocks that come up when there are just kind of distant abstract ideas that maybe the students don't totally follow along with. And so the personalization and the customization, no matter what level you're doing, it is something that never existed before. I mean, it was something that teachers were always told to do, but it was never a real possibility. Not at scale for the size of our classes. And so that's a really exciting part for me. And I see my students doing that, in my classroom too, where they're like, oh, hold on a second, I can connect it. I can connect my country to what I'm doing in California and these different ideas. And I think that's really powerful and motivating for them as well.
Yes, excellent. AI does bring, like independence to the lives of students. And we have been seeing the students in the age group of 8 to 18 doing things on their own without coming to classroom. They are learning programming, they are learning languages, and so on. So thank you, Brent, for
Absolutely.
that input. Robert, in addition to what Eric just mentioned, could you suggest some meaningful classroom activities to which AI adds a real value?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question. So a few, a couple things come to mind, very recent examples and things that I'm hearing a lot of colleagues talking about. And we're doing some interviews actually with other faculty across our campus, and we're hearing some interesting things. Just a couple of themes, maybe three that come to mind. One is the power of generative AI and some of the foundational models that we're using to essentially, I think this has already been mentioned, individualize instruction. And so if I, as a faculty member, whether I have 20 students in my class or 50, if I can extend my power as a mentor, guide, instructor to my students and figure out ways to have AI essentially, be an extension and provide that one-on-one uh, guidance, that's really powerful. And so one example that I have is trying to, for example, let's say I'm having my students work in groups and get ready for presentations, something that happens a lot in social sciences and a lot of other classrooms. And so instead of me going around and trying to run around and give each of the groups feedback, I can guide them through, guided prompts and suggestions on how they can have an AI tool give them critical feedback on their presentation. So it's real time guidance that's meaningful to them, relevant to the learning, and can be quite powerful. Another one is we hear a lot about. We're talking to some writing teachers and I know Eric and Brent are quite familiar with teaching writing, and so it's been interesting to hear sort of, divergent paths in terms of approaching the teaching of writing. Some of the faculty I've heard about at USC are sort of going back to paper and pencil and in class, rumination and
Hmm.
writing, especially maybe in the area of poetry and stuff like that. But then I've heard some really interesting stuff too about tools that are being developed to essentially aid students and give them, again, kind of that real-time guidance as process writers. So getting real-time feedback on their writing. And then we even have a tool being developed at USC, which is a small language model where the faculty are interacting and seeing it in real time, and they have relative confidence that the students, are working within that model and not going outside. Of course, they could, but that we have to get back to just some level of trust. A third example, and this is one I'm personally most excited about, and I'm hearing this being talked about a lot among my colleagues. And this would get it, I think, directly at sort of informing and changing pedagogy. And that is more realistic cases and real life applications being used in instruction. In other words, case method is very popular in business. It has been for decades. But in the past, developing cases was quite laborious, and you had to pay, a bunch of money to someplace like Harvard Business Review to get those cases. Now, I'm hearing lots of my colleagues talk about creating very nuanced, very specific, and very successful cases, all manner of things that can really enliven teaching and bring content into a much more of an applied, kind of authentic, meaningful experience. And so, that's something that I personally have seen firsthand, and these are just some of the ways that I've been hearing my colleagues talk about
Yes.
sort of fruitful
Yes.
ways of using AI.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, the case method you just mentioned, I have personally tried it, and many of my colleagues even have utilized cases generated by AI, and they are, like in fraction of seconds, you are able to, like dynamically generate them, modify them according to the level and need of your students. So yes,
That's
thank
right.
you very much for sharing. Brent, many teachers feel overwhelmed by AI tools. What to use, whether to deploy a laptop, mobile. That was the question 10 years back. Now it is whether to go for Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT. So, where do you think the educators should begin?
Yeah, I mean, th this is a tricky question, right? Because they're all in competition with each other, and one of these tools moves past the next one this week, and then the week after that, it changes again. So my first advice is, if your institution has access to a tool, use that, right? If your institution is paying for it, use whatever's practical and accessible for you. Uh, you can choose, amongst all these different tools. They all have slightly different interesting strengths. For me personally, at this time, I'm using Claude and Gemini quite a lot. And some of the other tools, depending on purposes that I'm using them for. But what I would suggest, though, is if you're talking about working with students on them, then you're going to want to look for something that is built to protect their privacy and to protect their information. And so the one that I'm particular fan of is Playlab, which is playlab.ai. And they are very ethical about their goals for using it for education, not for using students' information when they're going into it to train their data. All of your information maintains privacy. And so depending on where you are in the world, there might be privacy rules around some of this information, and regardless of if there are regulations, I would still say it's very important because students don't necessarily always know like what's you know how to protect their privacy, or whether or not they can protect anything online. So a tool like Playlab can be really great. So that's one that I do tend to like a lot. And then depending on different goals that you're trying to play with. I like Gemini. Some of the speaking features, having students speaking back and forth can be really interesting. They can get some fun experiences with those. And then the last one too, and again, most any of these tools can be fine for it, but I'll stick with Gemini for a moment here because of the image generation. And I think there's a really large understudied world of how image generation can really help with language acquisition. And so there's these ideas going on where, before when you drew a picture, but now you can draw pictures and take photographs with the words that you have. And so the ability to do those with any kind of these image generation options, and even as something as straightforward as Canva, you can do a lot of these things. And so you can say, hey, we're going to work on the present progressive, and we're going to use gerund forms, and so we want to show pictures of someone in the middle of doing an action, right? And
Yes.
so then let's talk about what language we need to be able to do to show what that looks like, and the students get really involved with it, right? And so if you're using something like Gemini to play with that, then they can say, oh, okay, well, I can reiterate this, I can try it again, and they don't feel as locked into it as they might if they had to draw a picture, which will take a lot of their time and effort. And maybe there's a little bit of embarrassment around the quality of their art, but with something like this, it's going to come out looking good. And so then they're more focused on is it showing me the language that I think that I'm trying to express? And so I really enjoy tools like that. Gemini is great. Midjourney is fine for that as well. There are endless tools, and there's too many to keep up with. So I would say slow yourself down, stick to one or two, and then see if you have changing needs, and then experiment with more as you need them, but start small.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Brent, for sharing these tools that we would definitely try. Robert, uh, after utilization comes the assessment. So the question here is, are current assessment methods still relevant in the age of AI-generated content?
Great question. I think my honest answer is I'm not sure yet. But let me explain. I think that going back to something Brent said earlier about the fact that the prevailing model in many fields has been just to sort of assess some final product as kind of a proxy for learning. And suddenly we're in a situation where in many fields or professions, those proxy products are no longer relevant because, as Brent pointed out, they could be generated in seconds, using any number of tools. So I think that this is probably one of the exciting areas where we're going to have to move quick to sort this out. Um, I don't want to defer or not answer the question, but I do feel like we are, in some fields, let's take law, for example. The assessments I think have been pretty clear and reliable and valid for many, many decades. In say law instruction. In that case, the assessments have sort of proven reliable and valid over time. And so now law schools are taking very dramatic measures to protect those assessments, laying down very stringent no AI policies, going to proctored only exams and things like this. But in other fields, we may not be as certain about the assessments that we used to use. In retrospect now, we may be saying, were we assessing learning at all? What were we assessing? So I just think that we just have to acknowledge the moment we're in, and this is probably one of the most exciting things for me about this moment, where I think, as I was saying before, I just feel like it's opening up some really interesting questions that could lead to some really interesting things. The last thing I'll say about this is we've been doing these discussions, as I mentioned. We've had two deliberations so far with about 40 participants and students, faculty, staff. And one of the things that surprised us is very low on the list of participant minds was the need to modify assessments right now. So there was a lot of other activities that rose much higher on the scale of these are things that we need to attend to, and we haven't analyzed that data yet, and we're going to be having more of these. But that struck me because on the one hand, I hear a lot of faculty talking about how quickly they are modifying their assessments, and yet I'm not sure what the data out there is saying about that. So that was a long and circuitous answer. I'm not sure I answered it so well, but I think the assessment piece is really going to be interesting to think about.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Eric, your thoughts on this?
I think it's a great question, and I don't know what the current assessments are in different contexts and different situations. In my own writing class, for me, I have the luxury of being able to have long student conferences with students. So if they're not able to talk about their topic, clearly that wasn't their paper. Or if it was their paper, it was only an AI generated version of their paper. Um, so I still like having long discussions with students while they're in between the rough draft and the final draft. Um, in presentations, I think the assessments still work. If we're doing mock job interviews for a business English class or for a speaking skills class, they still work. I want to kind of recenter the conversation as much as possible back on the authentic interaction between people in the moment and in the classroom. I think that, some of these old classic assessments work fine. But some of them we knew were pointless. Filling in the blanks and multiple choice questions are really problematic. And look, I benefited from that because I've got a good memory. I can memorize a lot, but it's not really meaningful. I think we've moved to a place where we can ask more fundamental questions, as Rob indicated, and get back to the key question of what do we mean by learning? What is the goal? And ask some of those first principle questions that are easy to forget, especially in organized systems where you're given a textbook, you're given a curriculum, there are, standardized tests at the end of the day. And I'm hoping that we can take advantage of the possibilities, and they may not be probabilities, but the possibilities to deepen individual instruction so that, people can kind of find their own path and thrive in their own ways.
Thank you, Eric. Yes. Now I have two questions for the whole panel. The first one goes like this. How do we encourage students to think independently when AI can always instantly generate answers? So definitely it's a huge challenge, like you give them an assignment and within minutes they are ready with it. So
I think this is the $1 million question. And I think that you have to get them excited about not being just a student with a student number, but a distinct individual with their own life, and then come up with activities and assignments that deepen their self-understanding and celebrate their process of becoming something else. So they know who they are and they help them discover who they might be through the assignments. You have to sell it, and in a way that you didn't have to sell maybe 4 years ago or 10 years ago. But alienation's not a new issue. We've always had bored, lazy, disenchanted, disengaged students. But I think that we have to, really let them use AI to deepen their understanding of their own lives and their own possibility. There's no doubt that they can just, be a copycat, but what's the point of that? Isn't it much more interesting to be yourself in this new time? It just seems to me that's what we have to sell them on.
thank you. Yes, Brent, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I think, I'll tie into Eric's answer there. I think the first thing is just absolutely finding ways to value students' voices, right? We live in this world of social media where everybody's kind of recording themselves talking about whatever it is they're thinking about the world, and that's kind of become normalized for everyone that their voice is important for something. And so when you tie that back into the learning, then you can say, well, hey, hold on a second. Like, is this you talking or is this like something speaking on your behalf? And do you know what you're letting speak on your behalf, right? Do you understand what it is making choices for around these things, right? And so, maybe people are aware of this, maybe not, but most of the AI models are heavily trained on, academic scholarly work on one level, and then kind of the furthest you can get from that, which is Reddit, right? And so when you have Reddit, people, all the information gets scraped from Reddit, then it's going to pull those voices, right? And maybe you're not an academic scholar, and maybe you're not a Reddit, if I may say, troll, I guess, right? Maybe you're just a standard person in the middle and you have your own voice. And so are you respecting the growth of your own voice as you're going through those conversations? So one is valuing their own voice. But the part of the problem, and I think, to the issues that come with this is that education until now is essentially built on a factory model, right? It's get everybody in, have everybody sit and listen, and then regurgitate the information, and then get out, and then ta-da, you're a productive member of society, for but by definition, I guess, right? And so, but we can do everything customized, right? We can do so much more that is focused on building the interests and the values of individual students, and so if we get away from that factory model of thinking and saying like, hey, we're actually trying to work with individual students, you to help you grow your learning in ways that are meaningful and valuable to you, and then let you share that voice out. That's something that students will tend to respond to a little bit more strongly. And then I think the last part here, I'll just keep this very quick, but we do struggle. I think right now in higher ed, it's a real problem because this is going to need an entire generation of understanding going through. And so we're going to need to really see it when the realities of the values of these conversations have to come through from elementary school all the way up. And then students are taught to challenge, what is given to them. And then they move up through the system understanding that. And so maybe right now they're just seeing AI as a quick way to answer something because they're bored in a boring system, right? Which I can't fault them for. And so, how do we flip that around and say, one, we want to make it more interesting, we want to make it more, directly valuable to you, but also, two, are you thinking and making these decisions for yourself because there are reasons to do them, or do you just think that you're trying to get yourself into a place in the corporate machine, I guess, of whatever level it is, and how are we helping students find their place in that process, or outside of that process if that's their choice as well.
Yes, we need to move closer to our students and help them, perhaps. Anything to share, Robert, here?
Yeah, I'll just briefly add a couple of thoughts. I think that build, nicely on what Eric and Brent have shared. Sort of two things come to mind. Um, One is, in the question, how do we encourage students to think independently? I think we have to go back to our entire premise of what we mean by thinking. And I think in the new world, we no longer need thinking that has to do with declarative knowledge or factual knowledge, or I mean that's just the new world that we're quick, rapidly entering in. And even the Bloom's taxonomy, I think, is sort of quickly becoming almost obsolete, and we need to start thinking about adding other levels above, the top levels. And probably that's where we need to push our students in terms of their thinking. So it probably has to do more with high, very high order thinking, having to do with wisdom, compassion, empathy, communication, engagement. I think so that's one way I would answer the question. And the other one is, and it goes back to what Eric said about sort of, in help sort of engaging students and we've had students for a long time, that have disengaged. So I do think, again, it's going to be putting the onus back on educators and systems to figure out how to engage students and how to get them invested. Just a quick example, I'm developing a new course for the fall, and I was working on the course intro unit this week, and I was even thinking about this myself. I was like, you know what? I can no longer rely on sort of compliance and performative effort, right? Like this is what the professor says, so I'm going to do it. Uh, and I actually got into reading about a new kind of growing, burgeoning field of curiosity studies. And so I found this great piece on what it means, the central role that curiosity plays in our learning, and yada yada yada. And I'm going to open the class with a little article about curiosity and just set the stage and say, look, you know, really all that matters here is what you're curious about, and kind of let that be a foray, or an entry point into this class. So that's my little attempt to kind of get at this question, in my own way.
Thank you, Robert. This is something that comes from all the participants that we have from different countries, and that is what are the skills that we, the teachers, should develop to become effective AI integrated educators? There are tools, there are technologies, but what is it that we need to develop in ourselves? Shall we have it from you, Eric?
Well, I want to build on what Rob just said. I think sparking curiosity and following our own curiosity and leading by example. I think too often people they're too quick to condemn what they haven't experienced, and they're not curious enough. And if you give a sense of possibility to students, you're going to learn from your students, because they're going to discover tools that you didn't know. They're going out and finding things and bringing back that to the classroom, and it's so much more interesting if you've got 31 active minds pursuing their curiosity, obviously within the guidelines and the subject, but that is a much more valuable experience, a much more interesting class than 31 people all focused on the same identical reading and the same responding. And it doesn't matter whether it's an essay response or multiple choice, it's not as interesting. So I think that what we have to do is deepen our curiosity. And I love that quote from Walt Whitman: be curious, not judgmental. And I think that right now we're in the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. We don't know enough, from my point of view, to be rigid or dogmatic in any way. That we just have to get. Now, having said that, the second thing I would say, and I kind of I heard Rob with great interest, and I'm not sure I completely agree about the moving beyond facts, because one of my concerns is that students are sometimes they'll defer so much to just like they once deferred to the authority of the teacher or the state or to some religious text. I feel like there's such deference paid to AI. And sometimes AI is just completely wrong. I'll give a silly example. I recently wanted to reconnect with an old friend of mine, and I hadn't talked to them for 5 years. And so I asked AI, based on the last information I had and what I knew about them when we were closer, so what's this person up to? And they said, well, they're divorced, and they now are going back and forth between Los Angeles, and they have a wine company in South Africa. And it was like, wow, that's an interesting life. And I did know she'd been divorced, but that's all I knew. And then I contacted her, and when we talked, turns out none of the AI stuff, and I didn't say anything, so I didn't totally email. But it's interesting how confidently utterly fictional material was presented to me. And it included that strange combination of accurate information, graduated from USC, blah, 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 and a lot of just fictional nonsense. So I think that we have to be careful when we know a topic inside out. We recognize the falsehoods, the hallucinations that we get from AI. But many of our students don't have that. And so they just kind of accept the answer that's given. And we don't descend into details. And all of this is a long way of saying I think we have to teach them how to distrust what they're given and then verify the information. And that's what I try to do with that interview with the dead author. Of some of it is absolutely valid and some of it is not, just not true. But I think we have to find some way to help them fact check. But sorry for the long answer.
True. Yes. Anything to add, Brent?
I think, you know, I love the curiosity conversation. I think it's
Yes.
just going to continue to be huge. And then I think I'll tie into that a little bit, which is, I do trainings all around the world, and we talk to different teachers, and one of the questions that always comes up from teachers is, well, can I do this? Is it okay if I do this? Whatever it is, and it's always this question of, asking permission. And I'd say, if the question starts with "Can I?" let's just stop right there. The answer is yes, right? Whatever you're going to ask further than that, you can do it, right? And so, to me, it's about stopping asking permission to figure out ways that you can connect with your students or have your students better connected to things, and just start experimenting with your ideas. And I think one really amazing way to do this is, with the vibe coding. If you haven't played with the vibe coding conversation, that's where you use AI to build little apps, or big apps, depending on how complicated you want to go. But you can build anything that you want. And this is, the big scare around, for the software developers, because there's a concern that they're losing their jobs. Of course, there's different conversations inside of there. But as a teacher, we have so many opportunities. And we say, oh, I want a tool that does this, but I just want it to do this little bit of a different thing inside of here, and no one's building that. And then in the past, you used to have to wait for someone to make these little simple, ethereal throwaway tools that maybe you'll just use once, but now you can build it in a matter of minutes and have your students interacting with them. And so that is also, it is the curiosity, right? It's the teacher saying, hey, hold on a second, what if I could do this? And then and you can just ask AI, like, hey, can you build this for me? Can I use it? And again, can I? So the answer is yes, right? And then you can see how it works. And I'm doing this all the time with my students. I say, well, I'll try it. I'll give it to my students. I always talk to my students about, this is my classroom is a laboratory. We're experimenting with language, so it's okay if we fail, if it's okay if we make mistakes. And then me giving them that permission also gives them the permission back to me, to say, like, hey, it's okay as a teacher who's trying something to make the mistakes and fail, because they're seeing both sides of it. That if I'm willing to go and make those steps, and they're also willing to make those steps. And so going back and forth inside of there can be really, really valuable, I think, for the students, but also it gives us the opportunity to expand what we think is possible as well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Brent, for that comprehensive answer. Moving on to the ethical and practical concerns, I have a question for Robert. What are the biggest ethical concerns surrounding AI in education today, since you are behind the policy, several policies at the USC, being the head of the department? You would be the right person to guide us.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things going on that are really important. One is, and Eric touched on this, talking about the need to be very discerning and to judge sort of input and output of AI. And so that, I think, would be one area that, sort of called the explainability problem. We don't really know how AI works. Even the engineers that have developed these tools ultimately don't know, can't say, they can't go in and trace, the actual interactions that are being made. So there's this big unknown about it, sort of the black box notion. And I think that leads to all sorts of questions about what are we really relying on, what's valid, what's credible, and it kind of, again, goes back to, I think, the good point that Eric made. Another interesting thing, and these are some of the things that have come out of the recent conversations that we've been having, is that there are there's lots of very legitimate ethical concerns about sustainability. To what extent are we engaging in a tool that is, in the US, we have states that are seeing energy prices rise 50, 75% because of data centers, that are absorbing and needing that power. We also have on campus, I've heard about students and faculty that are just opting out completely. So if I have a student or if a colleague or others are going to opt out of this entire endeavor, what does that mean in terms of, the rights and that they might have, or a student in my class that opts out of AI? What is that going to mean for me, and how am I going to handle that in an ethically right way? Um, Data privacy and transparency are two others. I'll just leave it with that. Transparency is a big issue. We're having very frank and sometimes difficult conversations, I'll just say, among colleagues and students right now about we say we want to be transparent, but we really don't know how to do that. And so even in, let's say, email exchanges, let's just say I have a colleague who is quite adept at using AI for generating emails. And if I get an email and I suspect that it's, an AI product, not necessarily something that my colleague typed in, what do I do with that? Do I ask them just to check, or do I just kind of move on because this is the new world we live in? Um, and then the privacy issue has come up a lot already in our discussions because, we might have some faculty that either out of naivete or just choice or for efficiency, might opt to dump student data, let's say papers, into an AI tool for assessment purposes, whereas others, would find that, they just would not do that. And so I just touched on a few, but I think there's some really cranky issues here that it's going to require difficult, hard conversations. And that's tough. We're not necessarily good at having really deep, difficult conversations as colleagues in professional settings often. And I think that is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can
Thank
I
you,
can I
Robert.
build on
Yes.
that for one
Yes.
second? I think
Please.
Rob is completely right about the transparency. And one of the things I often ask is students to tell me how did they use AI in their research and in various processes. And some activities we'll do together in class, finding keywords or possible titles, brainstorming. But I think the transparency is just really key. Um, and it is annoying when you know that students are using AI for a simple email, and you didn't need to give me 6 paragraphs. You could have given me 2 sentences, and that would have been fine. You know?
So true. Thank you, Eric. Uh, Similar pattern, and we have another question, Eric. Are we preparing with the use of AI? Are we preparing our students for the future or making them too dependent on technology? So, I mean, it's difficult to answer, but how to balance?
That's a
It's
great
where,
question. I know there's a lot of concern. I'm an old man, and I remember when I could, from memory, I knew dozens and dozens of phone numbers. Right now, the only phone numbers I really know are my wife's. And that's a little weird. But I've kind of offloaded that information, cognitive offload to the phone on that. But it's a little different than cognitive surrender, which is what I think a lot of students are doing, if we're not careful, where they're pretty content to not do the research, not do the exploration, not find out, not challenge, not do critical thinking, not like if they write an essay on asserting 6 points, well, then let's have another student challenge that with those 6 points and do research with AI, challenging the best arguments against that and going back and forth. I'm very nervous about the temptation of ease. So I think the only answer is to get people excited and be curious about themselves, their lives, their surroundings. I don't think we can um, rely on tradition or respect for authority or deference anymore. There's some very esteemed Ivy League schools now that for the first time are having proctored exams and asking for people to sign and make a little statement that they are the author of the actual paper being submitted. I can see honor codes coming back in style. But I think we have to use the tools. Here's the thing. We do live in 2026. We don't live in 1926. If students don't have access to these tools, there is a danger that they are at a serious disadvantage vis-a-vis how much they're able to produce and how many activities they're able to do and how many environments they're able to thrive in compared to some of their colleagues. So um, I feel like we have to use AI. We have to use it intelligently, and some of us are, and I'm in this camp, are going to use it more slowly and selectively than others. Um, but there's no getting around it. And even if we are suspicious and we believe that AI kind of shows the wisdom of the Russian proverb, trust but verify, and maybe
Yes.
we may even think it's distrust and verify, we still have to use some of these magical new tools just because the countries that do embrace it are going to be so much more productive and prosperous and powerful than the others. And you know, there is a connection between technology, science, and prosperity. And I think the universities have to be on the side of knowledge acquisition and knowledge expansion, not trying to ban knowledge or limit curiosity or block possibilities. But, you know, that's where I'm at.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Yes, trust, oblique distrust, and verify. We need to. Brent, you have already told us about the tools that we could try with. If you could, when it comes to the future of AI in education, if you could tell us about some of the practices that we educators should explore responsibly.
Yeah. So I think that when we're there's lots of different practices. I guess the ways to kind of deal with this conversation. I'll start by talking about uh, giving tools to students and having them interact with them. And then if you want to ask questions about other ways of using it, we could talk about that as well. But I think one of the biggest things, and this is kind of going back into the positive side of things, and the really interesting potentials is one of the things that we can do with AI is have it do follow-up work, right? And so with traditional ed tech tools, there's kind of like a one and done conversation, right? As Eric pointed out earlier about multiple choice questions, okay, I choose B, right or wrong, right? And then you're kind of done with your assessment of that work. But what you can do with AI is the same thing that a teacher can do sitting next to a student is you can say, well, let's do step one, then step two, then step three, then step four, and let's process through these whole things and link them all together, right? And so if you have, and I'll just keep this as simple as possible with like a chat, right? If you have a student do something like, okay, you're going to let's just say you're going to isolate these words and put them into their parts of speech, right? So is this a noun? Is this a verb? Is this an adjective? Whatever it is, right? And say, okay, hey, this is a noun, right? And the students can identify that, and then you say, great, okay, now let's use it in. So now that you have shown me that you know that it's a noun, can you use it in a sentence as a noun, right? And then follows up with that, right, immediately. So this is something that a standard teacher would do in any case, right? But you can have students do these things on their own process. Like you can give it to them as an AI and they can practice it when they're on the bus, or they can practice it when they're waiting in line at the grocery store, whatever else it is. And so that could be step two. So, okay, yes, I can build it as a sentence. Okay, now that you've shown me that you're able to do this, so whether it's right or wrong, you can have the AI respond to those different choices choices, right? So if the student makes a wrong choice, they can say, oh, and by the way, in positive, reinforcing ways that make them feel good about themselves, not in, sometimes as teachers, when we do this multiple times over and over again, we can get frustrated, and that feeling can sometimes come across for our students. But the AI is kind of always friendly and always prepared. So you can say, okay, well, no, you didn't quite get that right, but let's look at what was going wrong with it. And then it can quickly give easy and accessible answers to the students, but then it can continue to push forward with those processes. And so if we stop thinking about it the way that we have thought about old-fashioned ed tech, which is kind of a one-to-one, basic back and forth interaction, and now we're talking about stepping in through layers, I think that's a really promising way to use these tools for learning and handing it over to students to be able to say, okay, how do we keep on growing this as a process rather than knowledge check, yes, no, okay, move forward. But we can continue to grow it out. And then, by the way, you can also take all of those, and if you're in an AI, a chat bot, it can keep a memory of that whole conversation and say, okay, now let's start pulling all of these together as one bigger unit, right? And again, none of this should be a big surprise to us as teachers, but we don't really think of AI that way yet. A lot of people are still using AI as essentially an alternative to a search box on Google, right? It's just like, I'm just using it the same way that I would use search. I'm asking a question, it's going to give me an answer. Well, let's stop thinking about it that way, and let's start thinking about it more as a support system that is moving us through, with the recognition, yes, that there are absolutely failures and miscommunications and things like that, and recognizing that. And so but then what I do for in my case is I also ask students to share links with me to their conversation, so then we can kind of look through it and say, okay, what did you get here? What did you get wrong? What was going on? Do we trust the AI in these conversations? And then my favorite thing is when AI fails, because then that's an opportunity to talk to the students about how much they should be trusting it or how much they shouldn't be trusting it, and how quick and easy it is to give over your agency to it, even when maybe, the authority isn't really there. And so I think that these are some of the ways that we should be thinking about implementing AI when we're handing it out to our students, and not just say go do something and then be done with it, but to say let's build a process where we can verify and grow our learning step by step.
Yes, thank you, Brent. Going quickly, Robert, if you could guide us on the kind of policies that schools and colleges and universities should create regarding the AI use.
Sure. I can answer this quickly only because this has really been the heart of the conversations we've been facilitating, that we are facilitating now around campus. So just based on the initial deliberations that we've been having, a few themes have definitely emerged. I'll just recite some of those. One is there seems to be a strong desire for guidance over policing. So when we talk about policing or setting boundaries or identifying ways to, cordon off AI use, that's not where these conversations are going. The conversations are much more going around helpful, practical guidance. Building on that, we've also seen that guidance has to be discipline specific. In other words, what you do for a writing program is going to be different than a computer science program, and that's going to be different than a MBA program, and the list goes on. In other words, and then what we're also thinking a lot, or realizing a lot, is, and this kind of gets back to ethics. If I only do what I think is right for my students in the context of my classroom, that's not enough. I have to do what's right for my students in the context of what they're going to see in their internship next week in the field that they're going to go into. So there's going to have to be policies that are geared much more around industry connected realities that our students are facing. And that, I think, is something that has emerged. Transparency came up. That is also coming up that came up tonight, and that's also coming up in our conversations. It's a difficult one, but one idea that we've been talking about is sort of having what would an AI explainer look like that both faculty and students use to each other when they engage in activities or assessment. And then the last one is I'll say, is sort of um, gets back to cognitive offloading was mentioned again, or I can't remember the word that's used, but um, so we're I think there does need to be a serious conversation around cognitive offloading, what that means. There's a new term I just stumbled on last week, strategic cognitive offloading, where it's like if I'm trading lower order thinking to AI and then using that space to do higher order thinking, that's a good trade, right? I'm actually winning in that trade. But if I'm offloading higher order thinking and replacing that with lower order, if I'm offloading thinking at all and not doing any in this place, that's not a good trade. So I think that these policies are going to have to take into account some of those fundamental core concerns that we're going to need to address as
Yes.
schools and systems.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Trainings and education matter at all levels of our teaching. So, to all three of you, how can teacher education programs, maybe revised teacher education programs, can help us prepare the future educators for this AI integrated teaching? How could it contribute to the new normal?
I can just jump right in. I'll just say briefly that I just want to call us back to, I think, a theme that maybe we've returned to a couple times tonight, which is sort of turning learning on its head and rethinking what we mean by learning. I think if we don't do that, then what we're at risk of is training teachers or being teachers ourselves that are just making tweaks to make the current system more efficient, and yet we're not digging and interrogating deeply into what is learning, is it occurring, why or why not, and I think to the deeper question of, how are we going back to the basics in terms of what does it mean to engage a human in the endeavor of curiosity, exploration, and learning. So I just think if we push ourselves and push our student teachers in those directions, I think we'll be putting them on a good path to ask the right questions.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, Eric, your thoughts on this?
I thought Rob gave a wonderful answer.
Yes.
The one thing I would say is that there's a temptation for people to say, "Oh, all these terrible new things are happening with AI," and to kind of gloss over the real deficiencies and sometimes even failures, at least in America, in public education and in education. So I think this is a chance to have not lower standards or even different standards, but actually higher standards that really meet the at least the perceived needs and desires of students. And I think that if we get back to those core questions, we're going to do much better because the current situation doesn't really benefit many people. America, we've had lowering math and reading scores for some time. We have stunningly large numbers of people that are functionally illiterate. Um, you can correlate educational um, uh, zip codes matter in America, and I don't think only in America. And the gap between the wealthier areas and the poor areas is just huge. And I do think we have to find ways for technology to work not only for the elite, but to work across the board. And I think AI offers new possibilities for that. If we can figure out how to do that.
Thank you, Eric. Brent, your thoughts on the training part?
Yeah, so as we've been saying, every idea in here is great. And I think the one thing I'm going to say is a little bit different, though, is I'm not particularly worried about AI integration in teaching. To me, it's not really. It's like it's what we're talking about right now, but in the future, it's like talking about internet integration in teaching, right? We just don't talk about it. It's just part of how things are, right? And so we'll need to really have a critical understanding of what that is. But then we also have to look at, more importantly than just like talking about it as a tool or a single purpose, is kind of recognizing, well, what is our job as educators but to prepare for students for the world that they're stepping into. And if we're not doing that, then what are we doing, right? Why are we in this field? And if we're not passionate about that, then are it, is AI rejection, for example, even a reality if we're talking about the world that the students are going to be moving into? Now, it doesn't mean we have to love it and embrace it, but it does mean that we have to talk about it, right? It does mean that we have to kind of have these conversations about it. So if we flip that model around and say, hey, it's not so much about, AI integrated teaching, but it's about teaching, and then AI happens to be a part of that, right? How does AI fit in with the way that we teach, and how does AI fit in the way that we work with our students? Okay, that's
Yes.
fine, right? But not so much as a like, let's just use AI because it's AI, but to be more thoughtful about it and say, okay, let's talk about what our students are going to need to use these things for, and what levels they're going to need to be able to be critical about it with, and make decisions that are thoughtful, that can be longer term for our students to consider, and not just the moment that they're using it in class.
Thank you, Brent. We are like it's been an hour that we have been talking. So we have a couple of questions from the audience as well. Before we take them, uh, I request all three of you to, if you could give one sentence of advice to educators navigating AI, would be?
I'll start.
Dwell in
Oh.
possibility. I like dwell in possibility. And it's that's my advice.
Yes, Brent.
Uh, Start small and move up from there. You are not supposed to be perfect at these things, and if you don't know what you're doing, take the first small step and figure out how that works, and then make adjustments as you go.
Thank you. Please, Robert.
Yeah, I think it's we're entering new territory and there's a lot of complexity and a lot of change. So I would encourage people to embrace skills that are useful, let's say an intercultural, exchange, right? Have a sense of humor. Um, think about what it means to tolerate ambiguity. Don't be afraid of, experimentation and failure, and just keep asking those big questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all three of you. Now, we have a couple of questions. The first one comes from Professor Veena Krishnamurthy. She says, how can educators use AI, be leveraged to support learners in a business English class who are given internal organizational templates to make their communication unique? So she has something from language. Also, she says, is only better prompting the key to improve learning or teaching skills? So these are the two questions from Veena. Eric,
I
if
think.
you
I'll just
could, yes,
go ahead.
I'm going to
please,
defer to
please,
Brent on
yes,
this.
Rob.
Yeah, we'll defer to Brent.
So I think we talked, I think there are good examples of the business models and case studies that Rob had mentioned earlier. Is probably, I think that answer kind of came up as the question came up, and so it was kind of at the same time. But I really do think that's an excellent way to deal with business English. Building out these processes. In the States, when I was a child, we had these books called Choose Your Own Adventures, right? And so you would, read to page one, and then you can choose path A or path B, and you can do these types of things with AI. So I think that that's a really good way to do case study type conversations with English, and showing your understanding through business English. The second one is for the better prompting. I'm not sure that the better prompt, yes, better prompting does create better responses inside of things, and doing structured work, right? The trick to that conversation, though, is that students, the biggest problem with AI is that you don't know what you're doing until you have the expertise to actually work with it, right? And so when you're talking about things as an expert or as someone who knows what you're talking about, then you can really work with AI, and that's a really, really valuable. But when you don't know what you're talking about and you interact with AI, you kind of are just ceding authority to it and assuming that what it's giving you is good enough for the information. And so that's where we're really having a problem. And so, yes, the prompting is good if you know what you're talking about when you're prompting it. But the problem is we're trying to teach our students to have enough knowledge to be able to prompt those things. And so it's a bit of a catch-22, and we're caught in the middle in some of those conversations, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Brent. We have one question from Dr. Pronima Bakchi. She says, is there any study that proves a positive correlation between the use of AI in education and improvement of the attention span of the learners?
This is a great question because we all know there are many studies against it and that attention spans are going down. Like I have the romantic idea that we can encourage students to re-engage with their lives through sometimes AI and step away from the computers a little bit. Step back and read 15, 20 minutes of literature a day from an old-fashioned hard book, a physical book that can help. This is a huge problem. Lower and lower levels of concentration. I am stunned at the breakdown when students tell me they can't watch a movie, it's too long. And this is a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
It is. There were some questions, like related to the policy and choosing the right tools, choosing the right ways to use those tools, which may allow us to hold separate panel discussions. So now the next speaker has already joined, so we do not have much time left. Thank you, Anisha, for joining us. Thank you very much, Eric, Robert, and Brent, for being a part of the AI Symposium. I'm happy to introduce you to Mr. Shankar Subbiah and Anusha Ramanathan, who would be taking forward the AI Symposium in the second session. I hand over the session to Dipali for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, respected moderator and distinguished panelists, for such an enlightening and engaging discussion on teaching with AI, possibilities, puzzles, and perils, which beautifully highlighted that AI is not here to replace teachers, but to empower educators and enhance the learning experiences. The panel emphasized that while AI offers tremendous possibilities such as personalized learning, accessibility, real-time feedback, and innovative classroom engagement, the human touch in education remains irreplaceable. Our experts also drew attention to important puzzles and challenges surrounding AI, including ethical concerns, academic integrity, data privacy, misinformation, and the need for responsible and balanced use of technology in education. Once again, thank you so much, all the esteemed panelists and moderator, for sharing their valuable insights and global perspectives with us. I also would like to highlight what the panelists said about this use of AI that focus on the process, the why, which reminded me the book by Simon Sinek, Start with the Why. Definitely, the focus has to be on the process, on the learning process, and not the product. And students should use the safe AI responsibly. That will help the teachers to be curious and the students to be curious and explorer.